Welcome to the Naked Life Podcast, where stripping is a way of life. I'm your host, Lo Wentworth. Shall we get started? Because I know you're ready. Hello. Welcome back to the Naked Life Podcast. I'm always so excited you guys are here and listening. And before we get into it, I want to remind you that I am running a special on my 90-minute hypnosis meditation, reconnection, and coaching package I have. It's just a one-off. It's just to help you through the holiday season. So when you survive it, 2, you have the game plan to start the new year off, feeling like you're ahead of the game instead of behind the game. Because no one likes to feel behind. I mean, there are so many people who feel behind in this life. And I'll get into that later about exactly why that might be. But it's just very interesting in my own story and coaching my clients and realizing that it is November and December's coming and it's just a whirlwind of holidays. And then before you know it, it's New Year's Eve and you're supposed to come up with a resolution, which, by the way, I don't believe in resolutions, but hey, everyone's supposed to be doing it. And then you're just like, well, shit, I'm behind if so-and-so on Instagram already knows what their word is for the year or what their goals are for 2023. No one's got time for that. I mean, you do have time for 90 minutes to reconnect with yourself, gain focus, and have a game plan for the next 5 steps. Maybe 5 steps to get you through the holiday season, through New Year's Eve, and recalibrate and realize you are actually ahead than most people are just by doing this. But I mean, it's up to you. You do you. You do you. Whatever feels right to you, you do you. But if the session is calling to you, just hit the link in the show notes, book it. It's running a special from $333 instead of the usual $555. And then there's integration Voxer afterwards as an option for you to take advantage of or not. I mean, you can get the hypnosis and be like, good, I'm done. Up to you. But with that, let us begin today's podcast. So I saw this quote the other day and it really just triggered me because I'm like, I'll read the quote and I'll get into why it triggered me. She remembered who she was and the game changed. I think it's how you pronounce her name is Lana Dalha. Don't quote me on it. I know one of the stories I tell myself is I suck at pronouncing people's names unless they tell me to do it. Never hooked on phonics. That's why I ask people to tell me and I repeat it in my head. But anyways, the quote was, she remembered who she was and the game changed. And that triggered me because what if you don't know who you actually are? Like, what if you don't know? In the sense of you can't even have it. There might be a seed from your childhood that gives you an inkling of who you are, but so much crap happened during your childhood that you had to become a chameleon, that you didn't have the chance to actually figure out who you are besides stepping into that role someone else was giving you or you were expected, or the role of trying to figure out who you needed to be so you would be safe growing up. And so that triggered me because a lot of people who grew up in a household that is, I don't want to say emotionally abusive, but lacked the capacity of holding emotions, lacked the capacity to allow people to be who they were, lacked the capacity to allow their children to make decisions and mess up and learn and grow and figure out who they are in this life, in the beginning of it all. Because when you're growing up and you're a child, it's meant to be carefree, fun, figuring out who you are, getting into messes, and just figuring it out, like having fun with this thing called life. But there are some of us who didn't get that. There are some of us who are labeled the strong ones, are labeled the overachievers, the fixers, the doers, those ones you just look to and you're just like, hey, my life's a shit show, help me fix it. And those are the people who learned that role so that they could get love and affection, so that they could create a safe environment for maybe a nanosecond, so that they weren't being yelled at for something they may or may not have done, so that they weren't getting in trouble for having the audacity to make a mistake, or breaking something on accident, or just being a kid growing up and then triggering people. And so then you get yelled at, and in your child mind, you don't understand what's wrong with you, and you take everything on. You take everything on to make it safe for your parents to be themselves, because they don't know how to do that for themselves. You took on the role of being the caregiver for your parents so that you could get love and affection, because when you were doing what they think they wanted you to do, what you were doing was putting themselves first and making their feelings a priority over yours. Then you were getting love and affection and attention. Then you were getting what you think is the illusion of a healthy relationship with a parent. You think mommy and daddy love me because I'm doing X, Y, and Z. But then when you grow up and you get into personal development, you figure more about yourself, like, you look back and see how fucked that was. How fucked it was that you had to put your parents' emotions before your own. How fucked it was that you probably had to raise your siblings and end your childhood because your parents couldn't do that in whatever capacity. And then over time, you learned that no matter what you did wasn't good enough, and you would always get in trouble. So then you learn to second guess yourself. You learn to read the room and pick up on social cues and changes in energy and moods. So that way, one, if you knew you were going to get yelled at, that there was just going to be, you're just going to become an emotional punching bag as a child, you braced yourself for it. And so when you get older and you realize you're basically assessing everyone as a threat. You're assessing everyone as a threat. You think you're going to get yelled at because you did something wrong, when you didn't do shit wrong. You didn't. You were just existing. You were just existing as a child. And I'll get to it more and more about with this podcast and everything. I feel like it's a mini soapbox when I go off on this. I think one of the things that is challenging as a child with narcissistic parents, or individuals or parents who exhibit strong narcissistic characteristics, there's a lot of second guessing yourself. And then when you're communicating the experiences you had growing up and the traumas you had to get over and work through, even to this day, you feel like you're being a bad person, and you feel guilty for highlighting the shit that happened because you were raised not to show your dirty underwear to the world, and that everything just got swept under the rug and you were supposed to be okay and fine with that, which does a number on your throat chakra. And when you learn that and you start using your voice like I'm using my voice, discussing stuff that I've had to go through and support my clients on and talk to people on, as you're trying to figure out who you fucking are as a person, because you have to unlearn the shit you learned growing up so you could survive. So whatever that may be, so that you could feel like you were getting an ounce of love and affection, which was still an illusion because you had to earn it. Where in my mind, if you're a child, you should just get it outright. You have a child, that you love your child. Here we go. I have a whole nother soapbox on the thing about like this whole narrative about how children are burdens. And I just think it's really fucked. I think it's really fucked when someone goes, oh, your children, you'll never experience so much love before just by this tiny human and this euphoric. But then it's the counteractive is like they're a burden because you have to raise them. You can't, oh, your life is over, your career is over, you can't travel, you can't do shit. You have to just, it's just, your life just becomes the child, and then you lose yourself. if you don't lose yourself in this world to taking care of your child, somehow that makes you a bad person. I'll just say it makes you a bad mom. If you're a mom and you're not somehow pouring from a shattered glass pitcher into their vases, like, you're a bad mom. And then your children become burdens because you are jaded because you're following societal rules that don't even work. All right, I'm getting off my soapbox on this one. And I swear there'll be something that connects this, because this is just how my solo podcast goes, and this is how my brain thinks. And it gets back to this identity of who are you? Really, there has been a lot of people talking about, like, they identify as a mom, and then their children grow up, and then who are they? Who are they really? Oh, I was a mom and I gave my life to your children. Well, quite frankly, your children want to see you happy. Your children want to see you doing things that match your words. You cannot say to your child, be like, go, do whatever you want to be when you grow up. Try the things, do this. And yet you are not making the time to do it yourself. You are showing them that what you're saying does not match your actions. And they are following your actions. And I'm coming from a place, I'm not a mother yet, but I'm coming from a place as a child growing up and just seeing her mom deplete herself and really, really wishing her mother would do something that would make her happy, who would actually put herself first and take boundaries. Seriously, I wonder what my life would be like if I saw that growing up instead of seeing the once you're a mother, you're only a fucking mother. Like, come on, let's be real. So that goes back to when you figure out who you are, that's, a game changer. But when you don't know who you are, when your identity is wrapped up in something someone told you to be or society said you should be, you hold on to that identity, never really taking a second to check yourself, to see if that is really who you are, or you're just trying to do that to appease the masses. So we're going to take that back to, like, you're a child. Your parents weren't emotionally available. You became the strong one. You did the things you needed to do and played the role just to fucking survive. Just to fucking survive. And then you fast forward, you're not healed. You don't take the time to check yourself and be like, am I really this? Or am I just perpetuating a role that you had? So, for example, I identify with a lot of, like, athletes, and when athletes, they see professional players, they retire, and then all of a sudden it's just a year of chaos for them because their identity was so wrapped up in them being a professional player. We'll just go with basketball because I grew up playing basketball. And my basketball career ended when I was 17 after I re-injured my right knee. I partially tore my ACL and tore a meniscus, partially tore a meniscus that I tore back in 6th grade. And so instead of having to have an ACL repair, they just did a scope and they shaved off the inside of my meniscus. Because a fun fact, blood stops flowing to the point of your meniscus in your knee. So it's the cushion between your joints is the meniscus. So I learned that from my first surgery because I almost had to be put on a donor list to get a replacement meniscus because I tore it that badly. But my career ended at 17 rather, and it ended because I knew, my senior year, I'd automatically be on varsity and I would never play. And I wasn't going to work my ass off for a team that also gave up halfway through a game when things got hard. Like, I don't play with people like that. And so that was part of the reason. Another part of the reason was I was tired of being injured. Like, I wanted to go on to play college ball. And I wanted all of that, but then I took a second And I still believed in God at the time as like the Christian God. I was just like, maybe God is trying to point me in a different direction. Because I also had ankle injuries. Like, I mean, I went out and I had my ankles taped. I had ankle braces to help stabilize them. I mean, I also brought back knee-high socks. I'm that cool of a trendsetter. But I was just like, maybe something bigger than me is telling me that I shouldn't be doing this. Like, this is not what I've meant to do, that I'll just put my body through even more injuries until I finally realize, you know, maybe this is not how I'm meant to live my life. So I did that, but little did I know that was the first step to losing the identity of who I was at that time, who I adopted to survive. And so slowly over the years, it started eroding through college and came to a head at the end of law school. When I graduated law school, like, I didn't know who I was. I didn't actually know. There were glimpses, but I didn't trust the glimpses of who I was because I grew up in a household where I had to second guess my intuition and put it ahead of someone else's quote unquote intuition or authority because they were supposed to know, right? Because they were the adult and they didn't. And my intuition was screaming at me that something was off. So you fast forward to that and it was just starting, like, where do you begin? Where do I unpack the layers of this human people see that I don't see? One of the things, like, people tell me I'm brave. I actually don't necessarily believe I'm brave. When they explain why they believe I'm brave, it just does not compute in my brain, because it's like, I'm not going off to war. I'm not facing some sort of adversary in the jungle, in the woods, or something where my life is in danger. I know that's an archaic way of thinking of being brave, and I understand people's logic of, you know, I continually face myself. I call myself out on my own shit and really have gotten to understand being like, is this actually me or is this me being triggered? And if I'm being triggered, is this actually 31-year-old me or is this 8-year-old me? Is this 18-year-old me? Is this 25-year-old me? Is this 3-year-old me? Is this 13-year-old me? And getting down to the nooks of crannies of what that is so I can heal my relationship with myself. Because the first and foremost relationship is with myself. It will always be with myself. And I have this conversation with people all the time about, like, attracting my partner. And I'm like, he's second in command of my ship. Like, I will be second in command of his ship. But he's the captain of his ship and I'm the captain of my ship. But we're both second in commands. That we're like partners and stuff. No one outranks my relationship with myself. And if someone started to outrank my relationship with myself, I'm going to need to take a step back and really look at this relationship and look to see, am I losing myself to stay in something that's not meant to be? Am I losing myself to make someone else feel better? Am I losing myself because I'm afraid of starting over? Like, how many people stay in relationships, not just romantic relationships, but friendships and family relationships, where you stay in a relationship because you're afraid of actually starting the fuck over? Just sit with that for a minute. Just sit with that. So a lot of people just stick and stay the same. They repeat even though they're slowly murdering their souls. God, nothing hurts me so much more than seeing someone slowly murder their soul because they're not taking a chance on themselves, because they're not putting themselves first, because they were taught differently, because they believed that they were doing right when their intuition is telling them that something is off, that something is wrong, and they need to follow it. Like, hard truth, quote unquote, bad truths are better than a good lie. Never lie to someone to make them feel better. I mean, never lie to someone, period. But you should never lie to someone just to make them feel better or you're afraid of telling them the truth. It does both of you a disservice, and it shows you lack respect in the relationship and you lack respect in yourself. Use your voice. Use it. You have it. Learn to use it. It takes time. But getting back to like when I first started really getting honest with myself of who Lo Wentworth is. Who is she? Is she really this badass everyone sees? Is she really this hard ice queen everyone's also got to know and see? Am I really like a hard human being? I am not. I have learned over the years, like my circle has always been small. It has always been small for various reasons. I had to do a lot of unlearning and unpacking around relationships in general. Because there's just been a lot of shitty things that happened to me that made me question and trust other people. And I don't give it freely. I do not. But the Ice Queen. I am not the Ice Queen. She is a part of who I am, but I am not her. So I developed this Ice Queen persona, and I used to relish in the fact that I didn't cry for years. Years. I think I was in college and I was like, I haven't cried for like 8 years. That's not healthy. That is not healthy. And I was celebrating the fact that I was emotionally unavailable, but I was celebrating the fact that that means I'm succeeding. I have my emotions in check. Yeah, bullshit. I mean, to this day, I still struggle with crying. I still struggle with it. I do allow myself, and I've created a safe space within my own relationship to be able to release the tears and feel safe to do so. Has not always been that way. Has not. And so when I was going through this process of getting to why I was this Ice Queen, and it was because it was the suit of armor I put on to protect myself. To protect myself from everyone, to keep them at arm's length. Because I was afraid of getting yelled at for making a mistake. Actually, I was afraid of getting yelled at for being myself. How many of you are afraid to be yourself because you're afraid you're going to be yelled at for it, or ridiculed, or judged, or bullied for it? I bet there's a lot of people out there who feel that way. Because I'm not the only one. I know I'm not the only one. And so when I'm unpacking the layers of the Ice Queen, she's now graduated to a mama bear. Like, you cross some boundaries with me? You better be prepared. You better. But the Ice Queen was the armor, because I felt like I needed to do that to feel safe. Even though internally I was dying and craving for someone to break through that armor to actually show me I was worth being loved and accepted for who I am. Even though I didn't really know who I was. And so when I get to that and work on my relationship with myself and realize that having this hard Ice Queen persona isn't actually truly who I am, then who the fuck am I? Because I've been her for so long that it was a struggle figuring out who I was. And accepting who I was. And allowing myself to become who I am and who I'm meant to be. Probably one of the hardest things I have ever done in my life. Staking claim, saying I'm no longer to play these roles, especially the familial role that I played. And I was willing to go through all of this shit. All of this shit, weaving through, telling people, reassessing boundaries, teaching people how I wanted to be treated, not how they thought they could still treat me, and understanding. God, I got a crash course in the world that dualities of truth exist. Dualities of truth. And I give this example. When I first started on this journey of figuring out who I was, my mother became the prime suspect. I had to work through a lot of mother wound to work through stuff. And I was going through some core memories that I've had with her, and just having this conversation about why I was upset with her. The reason why we didn't have a close relationship, and how I just felt with my mother in general. So I remember being in this car, driving to work, and just getting so fucking mad and angry because she would not accept my truth because it wasn't her truth. Except it wasn't her truth, therefore I was wrong. I wasn't wrong. My truth was still my truth. It was valid. She did not like my truth because, again, it showed the underbelly of things that was not working in the relationship. And I'm not willing to be in relationships where I can't bring up things and have hard conversations about how I felt or how someone's actions triggered me and made me feel. And vice versa. Like, I don't want relationships like that. Like, I'm going through my life and realizing healing relationships, accepting different relationships as they are. I had to work through and let things go and realize, again, my truth is my truth. It doesn't mean it's someone else's truth. That's fine. I'm also of the belief that no one ever knows the real truth because we're all looking through our own lens of perception. Like, you have your truth, I have my truth, and then there's the truth, which, again, no one's ever going to know, really, because of the lenses we see. Like, you could look at the sky and I could be like, oh, it's baby blue. And you can be like, it's topaz. Those are two different colors. They are. They may look similar. Actually, I don't know if topaz and baby blue look similar. But there could be the slightest little change and they're two different colors. But that was because you thought it was topaz and I thought it was baby blue. So then it gets back to, like, what is your truth? Who are you? What is your identity as a person? We are trying to wade through all of the shit. Like, you have realized now that you got the short end of the stick. You are so angry about how you grew up, what happened in your childhood, what happened in your teens, even in your early 20s. I mean, what happened getting you to the point where you finally woke up to who you are. And you don't know who you are because you weren't given the chance, or you didn't create the room to figure out who you were because you thought you just had to continue with the status quo and it would get better. And it didn't. Until finally the universe came with the glorious baseball bat with barbed wire wrapped around it and just straight up smacked you over the head 7 times for you finally to get the message. Finally. So then where do you begin? Where do you begin in this process of figuring out who you are when you've learned to second guess everything? First of all, you begin what I call, like, getting back to basics. So there have been glimpses and seeds throughout your life, especially in your childhood. Getting back to your basic is based on, like, your childhood and teens. Like, what did you do that you enjoyed? And it could be something that you even escaped into. So for me, I enjoyed basketball. Basketball was my saving grace. Like, it was the one place where nothing, like, I could work through my shit physically and it was mine. The outside world was the outside world and basketball was mine. And so when I realized going through this and being like, I did basketball. Basketball helped me physically move the energy out of my body and deal with and process things. So therefore, that's when exercise came in. And so I added exercising again. This is after law school. So law school, I stopped exercising. I mean, I could just completely lost myself. It was an even bigger crash course in a relationship that was not working. Should have ended shortly after it began, but instead I was still following the status quo. Anyways, that's another episode. So, but getting back to basics. So then it's working out. And then I also was realizing I wasn't feeling so fulfilled. And then I realized it was also like expressing myself in the arts, whether it be painting, whether it be drawing, some sort of musical stuff going on. Like I needed to find an outlet that was also in the arts. So I did. I needed both because those were fun. And I enjoyed those growing up. They were mine. So what was it that you did growing up that you enjoyed? That's the first step of figuring out who you are as a person and healing your relationship with yourself. The first step, going back to what you did as a child that you enjoyed. And it could be also in your teens, like if you enjoyed reading and you're not reading, that could also be another way to get back to basics. Like, you know what it is. And don't judge yourself for being like, well, I'm a grown-ass woman. I don't need to be doing, like, that was when I was a child. You're healing a relationship with yourself, and your childlike self didn't have any filters until they learned those filters. And they just did things they tried and enjoyed. And if you're still like, I don't know, is there something out there that you're just like, ooh, that would be fun to do? So, like, for example, I wanted to learn photography. I wanted to learn about the shutter, the aperture. I don't know what API stands for in photography. It stands for something completely else in technology, but aperture, just some other stuff. Exposure. It's been a while since I've taken this class, but I know what the buttons are on my digital camera to use them to get the effects that I want. If there's something that interests you, like I want to take salsa dancing, eventually I'll do it. Right now, I'm in the process of writing a book and getting started on writing that book and what that looks like. Because one of the things I've realized is that writing was always there, and I could always express myself. I could always express myself through writing and be okay with it. And be good. Like I was releasing the emotions, whether it be a poem or a story. Like writing was always there. It was always there. So what is it? What is it that is making you feel expansive? What is it that's piquing your curiosity? Because that's the quickest way to getting back to basics, and it's the quickest way of starting to rebuild that foundation of that identity of who you are, who you've always been, who you're always meant to be. And that is the game changer. That is the game changer. So this remembering of who you are could also take it into, I don't want to say the woo-woo world, but it is like the woo-woo world, like the energetic level, the soul level, all of that. This is a process of remembering who you are. I bet there's also a seed, an inkling in you that you've always known, but you've never allowed yourself to play and grow and flourish in this. And I say that because there have been parts of me I've always known that is just very clear of this is who I am. I mean, you could have been like me who took all of the identity and personality quizzes. Like, I don't even do those anymore because I know exactly what it's going to tell me. I just know because I've done it enough to know who I am. I've done those enough to know who I am. And now instead of shaming myself for it, I've learned to embrace that is who I am. That is just parts of who I am. There are other parts of who I am that I'm working on developing. I mean, since 2019, and I know it's been since 2019 because I found an old calendar, I've been working on stepping into my feminine energy, leading with my feminine energy, because my core essence is feminine, not the masculine energy that I learned that created the Ice Queen, and that is the armor that instantly comes up when I feel like there's something off in my environment. I feel like there's something off about an interaction with a human I am interacting with. Like, it just instantly goes up. So I've also learned to trust when that happens, because I've also worked on developing it and understanding it and knowing when it is healthy versus when it is not healthy. I know the difference. It feels completely different in my body. And that's a whole nother episode. But since 2019, I have been working on stepping into my feminine essence and what that looks like to me. And for a while, I was shaming myself that I am not the sundress, barefoot, walking in the country, having my garden, like all sunshine and rainbows feminine. I'm not that. I am more the dark, sensual feminine. And I tend to like the quote unquote dark feminine more because I identify more with the story of Persephone and Hades, and how Persephone is the goddess of spring, but also the queen of the underworld. So being able to be these dualities, creating growth, but also being able to create death. It's just the cycle of life. But I identify with more of that. And I didn't realize until after I was having a conversation with a dear friend that was the feminine, that's the feminine of who I am. Every once in a while, I'll want to put on a sundress. But when I have this image of myself wearing the stereotypical like sundresses you think is like feminine, there's always a slit in the skirt, bringing that sensual side, that like dark side, like, so anyways, but I'm working through that and how to like step fully into my feminine. But in the beginning, I didn't know that's what I needed. I didn't know that was my core identity of who I was really until I started doing the foundational work and building and healing my relationship with myself on the other parts of me. So before I could get to this core version of wanting to heal my relationship with myself and be in my feminine and embrace what my feminine energy is and looks like, I had to start from the beginning of I enjoyed basketball, so therefore working out was part of my daily life. I enjoyed writing, some sort of arts, like now that is going to be a part of my daily life, whether I am writing or drawing. Eventually, I want to start working with a singing coach and be singing again. And all of this is taking back my power of who I am. Just like all of this is you taking back your power of who you are. And it starts small. So like Shrek, you're an onion. You got to start peeling back the layers. I mean, right now, if I saw you on the street and was like, you want to be the feminine goddess. You want to embrace the feminine goddess. You're going to look at me with 7 different eyes and be like, fuck you. I don't want that, because still there's some stories you have to learn about the masculine and feminine. And also the toxic masculine versus the non-toxic masculine. Same with the toxic feminine and the non-toxic feminine. That's a whole other story or other podcasts as well. But what you're really wanting is to heal your relationship with you, getting back to you, knowing who the fuck you are. And I can't outright be like, hey, let's go to a women's circle and dance around a bonfire and burn shit. You're going to be like, what the fuck? Trust me, you're going to be like, fuck the fuck. It's going to be like a cultural shock to you and put you back in your journey that bring you forward. Or unless you're just like, that may be an edge I want to go to and jump in, go for it. Maybe you don't. But I'm gonna hazard a guess that if you're listening to this podcast
You learn to be in your hyper masculine all the time. Wow, my accent got real weird at the moment. You learned that you had to be in your masculine in order to survive, and that being in your feminine was bad, but you want to be in your feminine. And how do you get to the point where you're ready to fully embrace your feminine and connect to all that is to being a woman and what that looks like for you? You got to start peeling back the layers. Start embracing the mini steps. Because the mini steps are where you build that foundation, that strong foundation of who you are. And rebuilding that confidence with yourself and healing your relationship with yourself. I mean, healing your relationship with yourself is the main thing, and the byproduct is self-confidence. The byproduct is self-respect. The byproduct is setting boundaries, because you're healing with your relationship with yourself, and you're taking back the wheel of your ship and being like, no, I'm the fucking captain of my ship. I may not know what the fuck I'm doing at the moment, but it's my ship. I'm the captain. Remember that. It is your ship, and you are the fucking captain of it. You do get to decide how you want to live your life, but right now, don't get into the overwhelm. Don't get into that point you have to have your 5-year plan out, your 10-year plan out. Sometimes, and quite frankly, when you're starting this and figuring out who you are, it's the 1-month plan. It's the 3-month plan max, because just like a child learning to walk and run and crawl and all of that, you're going through the process and trying different ways of being on, different things you think who you are as a person. And if you do the 5-year plan, it feels like you get locked in and that's who you have to be. When you have not learned the muscle, the resilience, the self-confidence and self-respect for yourself to be like, that 5-year plan I made a year ago, I actually don't want most of that stuff on there. Nope, I don't want those things. And allowing yourself to shift in that and become the person you're meant to be, shifting your identity and all of that looks like of who you actually are, and getting comfortable in the death and rebirth process. Because being a woman and being in your feminine, it's a constant death and rebirth cycle. I mean, every month we get our periods. Constant death and rebirth cycle with our hormones and all of that and everything. And understanding that process for yourself. You are constantly rebirthing and dying. It's just a constant process. You're constantly going to be going through this. But to build that resilient muscle, to understand different parts of your ego are dying, you have to be able to do it in small containers versus doing the huge container that can be overwhelming and you feel like doesn't allow you room to grow and expand and change your mind. Like, this is your life. You are not that child whose parents told you you had to be the certain way and you could not change. You're allowed to change. You're allowed to change moment to moment. You're not even allowed to judge yourself on it, but I'm going to give you the 30 seconds. You can judge yourself for 30 seconds and then move the fuck on. Because we're humans. We are humans. I had a client and friend once where we were having a conversation about different things, and it was a moment where I was just going to her and I was just like, it's like, I don't care about what X wants. I don't really give a fuck about what this person wants. Like, what do you want? What do you want? And she started crying, and I'm just like, I'm not going to even tell you not to judge yourself and get your upset with yourself on this, because you're going to do it anyway. So go ahead. Get upset with yourself. Lord knows I get upset with myself all the time when I'm just like, fuck. Like, if someone told me that, like, I was just like, I don't give a fuck about what your family thinks, Lo. I want to know what you think, what you want. Oh, yes, the tears would come out, and I would be judging myself very hard for not putting myself first and understanding what that was, and then having someone hold the space for me and understand like this whole process of like, I'm going to judge myself and let it go and move on so you can move forward. I will let you judge yourself for 30 seconds, but I will not let you judge yourself for 30 days and 3 days or even a day after something that is in your control that you can shift and make happen. I will not. And with that, I will leave you with this. What is something you did growing up that you enjoyed? Or what is something you did that you enjoyed that you stopped? And why not pick that up again? Why not make that small time, that small shift, that change to pick that up again, to heal your relationship with yourself? To start figuring out who it is that you are and change the fucking game. You don't always need to know who you are to change the game. You just need to know that and trust that you know there's something better for you. That you know you are not this person you were told you had to be, and that you deserve to live your life to the fullest and figure out who that is. You deserve to be your full self, whoever she is. You deserve that in that lifetime. You do not deserve to dwindle your light and pretend to be someone you're not. Because that is killing yourself before you've even died. You're not really with the land of the living. You're with the land of the walking dead. So you get to decide if you want to start enjoying the land of the living, or if you still want to continue down the line of the walking dead. I'm going to guess you want to come and join the land of the living and what that looks like for you and live your life full out. Because, I mean, you really have one life. And I believe living a full life means you live multiple lifetimes within one lifetime. Meaning you play out the multiple versions of you and your identity and have fun with it. Have fun. Because when you're having fun and being playful and figuring out who you are and not shaming yourself for trying things, not shaming yourself for being in seasons where you're the asshole, and understanding you're going through shit and you're taking responsibility for your side of the street, like, that is living a full life. What is not living a full life is just sweeping all the bad shit under the rug and pretending to be something you're not. Thank you for listening to this episode of the Naked Life Podcast. Please remember to rate, review, subscribe to this podcast, and share with all your friends.